amazing parents. Welcome back to another episode of Pep Talk, the Parent Experience Podcast. I'm Kayla, joined by my co-host.
I'm Robert.
And we're super excited to be back for another month giving you a pep talk.
Yes, our whole purpose for this podcast is to encourage you and equip you in your parenting journey, because we know parenting can be a little bit of a roller coaster with ups and downs. So this is just your monthly check-in, your pep talk. So we hope that you leave encouraged and equipped to raise your kids to know and to love God. So with that being said, before we dive in, I just want to encourage you to share this podcast on your social media. You can give this a like, you can rate the podcast. Really, word of mouth is the best way to spread this podcast to other people so that they can be encouraged in their parenting journey as well. So do that, and then we'll get into the episode, Kayla.
All right, well, this month we're talking about commitment, right? And from 1 Timothy, training your body has some value, but training in godliness has great value. And so we're working with our kids, talking about commitment. Let's be committed in prayer. Let's be committed in talking about God. Let's be committed in hearing from God. Like, how do we turn our attention to notice God and where He is? And so I'm really excited about this month with our kids and just really working on commitment. And, you know, parents, really practical. End of school year, like, we can commit. Every day we're going to try to give our best and finish strong, right? It's just a really practical. If you're in sports or dance, you can help your kids really learn about commitment. But then remembering, like, what's the most important thing as a family that we want to commit to, right? And that's faith. So that's what we're going to talk about on Sundays at New Life Kids this month. I'm really excited for the month.
I love that. And we're doing something special with our parenting segment, right?
Yes. So we're going to start a little mini series called Parenting with Purpose. Right? It takes a lot of intentionality to make something great and to put that focus on it. And so the next couple sessions, we're going to be talking about parenting with purpose. And to get started off, we invited Pastor Dave and Tiffany Cumming onto the podcast. So, hey, would you guys say hey?
Yeah.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
It's fun to be here.
We're so glad you guys are here. And they kicked off tonight talking about having a mission and a purpose as a family, identifying that. And so we're going to talk about that tonight. But first, would you tell us, for those of our listeners who don't know, tell us a little bit about your family and what you guys do.
Yeah, so I'm Tiffany, and we have 5 kids ranging in the ages from 10 to 3.5. And so it's a zoo. It's a
Yes.
zoo at our house.
Yeah.
I love that you added the half, 3.5.
Oh,
It's
that's
really
what,
important.
That's what Edge would tell you.
Yeah.
He would say, I'm 3.5.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what do you guys do? Pastor Dave, you're on staff at the church, and what's your role?
Yeah. So I'm executive campus pastor. And so campus pastor of the Kearney campus. And then I get to coach and support the campus pastors of our other campuses, including you, Robert, with New Life Online. And then I also get to oversee worship experience. And so everything that happens in our auditoriums on Sundays and things like that, I get to oversee and help provide vision and structure for.
That's awesome. So, okay, we got to just like start off with this. Like, what do you guys like to do for fun? So with your zoo of a house, right? Like, what do you guys find that just is like refilling your cup? What's fun for you?
I find a lot of fulfillment in baking or cooking, especially if I get to share it with others and they eat it and they love it. So that's really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I would say I love watching basketball, especially with our boys. Our boys, especially the older 3, just love watching basketball. So that'd be one thing. And then I love just getting together and going through a book with somebody and using it to stir conversation with one another to encourage us to continue to grow and pursue God and grow in that relationship with Him. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we're glad to have you guys on Pep Talk today. And so we're talking about having a mission statement as a family. Like, what's our mission? What's our goal and our purpose? At New Life, our mission is
To see people find Jesus and lives changed.
And so, you know, that drives every decision we do as a church, right? We're always filtering through that. How does this influence the families in our community, right? We want to see people find Jesus and their lives changed and become more and more like Him. And so I think that we can use that concept then, even in our family. Like, what's our family's mission statement? What what's our goal for that? So talk to us a little bit about like why should we have a mission statement as a family?
Yeah, I think in the context of the church, we use the cause, to see people find Jesus and life change. It gives us direction. It acts as a filter that helps us make decisions. And I think it's the same thing then with a family. We're faced with, hundreds of decisions, it seems like every single day. And if we don't have kind of that guiding mission statement or vision statement, it can be really difficult to know what to say yes to, what to say no to, what to prioritize, and really ultimately what we're even trying to accomplish as parents with kids.
Yeah, and I think that in a lot of different areas of our lives, we have mission statements or goals that maybe we just haven't verbalized. Like for example, in our home, I'm the keeper of the home. Like that is my identity or that's my role. And so I do all the cooking and all of that. But like I would like to cook from scratch and I cook gluten-free just for my health. And so that's kind of the goal. And so I filter everything through that. So I think we do this a lot in our lives, not just in church or like we're talking about in our families, but personally, we filter a lot of things through goals or mission statements that we haven't necessarily said out loud or communicated in that same light. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Definitely. And I think like there's so many benefits to writing it out or having it visible somewhere to make it a goal. Like you said, like I think we do have maybe really good intentions for our families. Like, man, this is what I would like our family to do. Or you hear someone else say it, or like, oh yeah, us too. Like that's our family too, right? But there's something about being able to visibly and tangibly see it. So you guys talked about if you don't have a vision, though, there's a lot of ways that can be pulling at your family's attention. Would you talk on that a little bit?
Yeah. So it's our belief that if we don't have a vision, if we don't have direction, then the enemy that does exist, Satan is a real, being, and he wants us to really be on any other path than the path that God has for us. And he doesn't care what that other path is, but as long as it's not the one that God has designed for us. We shared the scripture, Proverbs 29:18. I'm going to read it for you so I don't get it wrong, but King James Version, where there is no vision, the people perish, but he that keepeth the law, happy is he. The Amplified Version, where there is no vision, no revelation of God and his word, the people are unrestrained. They're just drifting. They're kind of going wherever. But happy and blessed is he who keeps the law of God. And so we find that it's really critical to have that mission statement, that vision for our family, so that we don't just end up somewhere that we don't want to be.
Yeah, I really liked you, Dave, you had shared the illustration of the sailboat and the motorboat. And I don't want to just repeat everything, obviously, that was said tonight, but I think it's a very good illustration. I think it makes it easy to understand that a sailboat will go wherever the wind is taking it, which is what our lives are like without mission statement or a goal or vision. And but what we really want is to be like the motorboat that we can then direct. We have a purpose. There is a clear vision to get it where we want it to go. But I just think that that's such a good illustration. It really gives you a good picture of what would happen if you don't have a vision.
True. Because the reality is we are parenting, whether it's intentional or not. So around our family talks, we talk a lot about parenting with intention, right? We're trying to be as intentional with the time that we have with our kids as we can to make the most of our years together, right? Like you shared a stat about the time we have with our kids.
Yeah. So I read recently that the 75% of the time that you're going to spend with your kid in their lifetime happens by the time they turn 12. So when you think about that, man, you got a short window of time. I remember when we started having kids, every parent that we talked to would say, oh man, enjoy it. It goes so fast. And they're 100% right. And so when you think about, man, okay, parenting, really the stage where they're at home under your roof, isn't it going to last forever? And it goes by so quick. And even let's say they leave the house at 18. Well, 2/3 of that, when they get to 12, you've already spent 75% of the time that you'll spend with them in their entire life. So we have to be really intentional, and we can't miss that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes for parents, it can, for me even, it can feel like a lot of pressure. Like, man, I got to make the most of this time, but I just really want my kid to take a nap. Like I just want this kid to fall asleep. But I recently had a gal tell me this, and I thought it was really wise. She said, find the moments that are joyful for you. Like when your kid comes up and says, hey, I loved playing this game with you. Find that and remember that moment is really joyful, right? Mm-hmm. Even if you're exhausted and your baby's crying for the millionth time and you're laying him down for the 5th time, like even if that's the case, find the things that are really sweet and then let's just try to be intentional in all those moments. So there's some ways we can be intentional, like setting up a statement, right? Like, or identifying what are the core values of our family. What do we value the most? So let's talk about some tips for a family that maybe is like, I would like to create this statement for my family, right? Like I want to have intentionality. I want to be purposeful with the time I have. What are some tips you would give to parents trying to create this for their family?
Yeah, I would start with saying, keep it simple. Keep it simple and make it memorable. Because if it's not simple and memorable, then it won't really be the guiding kind of force that you want it to be in your life. I think we've probably all been somewhere or worked somewhere where there was a mission statement that was so long and not memorable, and you had to go look it up to remember what it was. So it doesn't really fulfill the purpose that a mission statement or a vision statement is supposed to have. And so I think that's one thing. I mean, and if we're talking about this vision statement in the context of our family, we've got young kids. We want our kids to understand and be able to state this statement. So it's got to be simple and it's got to be memorable. So I would start there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's really good. So, that's really practical. Like, let's make it something that we can repeat, we can say again. What about there are a lot of really good things, right? We want to be really healthy. We want to eat our vegetables every day. These are important things too, right? Mm-hmm. But how do you think, maybe writing it down? What are some good ways to get started on forming the words and the values that you want reflected in it?
Yeah, I think it's important to think about your priorities as a family. What do you want your kids to say about growing up or about their family once they're older and out of the house? What do you want their reflections about it to be? And so I think it's bigger than those things that you said, we want to eat healthy or whatever. Yes, those are important, and maybe that is kind of in there somehow. But that's not probably going to be a core piece of it. I don't know. I guess it's totally personal preference, but priorities for us, what's a priority? Well, we want our kids to know Jesus. We want to raise them in the church. And so that's where we're going to start with our core value or our mission statement. And I think another thing that you could do too is looking at maybe the things you don't want your kids to remember, or, kind of going the opposite way. What is something I wouldn't want them to say? Or what are some things I know for sure I don't want to be a part of this? And then flipping it.
Yeah. So if, just maybe an example of, okay, we don't want our kids to be selfish.
Right.
And so we're going to value being selfless. We're going to give them opportunities. We're going to model this for them so that they don't grow up selfish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like a second child syndrome too. I'm going to learn from the oldest. I think there's a factor of that too when you're figuring out what do we want this to be in our values? You could probably learn from other experiences or other situations you've experienced and I'm going to learn from that and we're going to try not to do that and not to replicate that. Mm-hmm. And that can go in and help you factor what you value as a family as well.
Yeah, and I think something else that can help them out is once we get through these tips, would you guys share kind of what you guys are working on for your parent statement? So don't log off just yet, guys. Okay, it's coming in just a little bit. It's a little bit of a hook to keep you on. Are there any other tips that you would share as we're thinking through this vision statement for our families?
Yeah, for sure. I think I would also look at, let's say that you want to become a teacher. That's your end goal. Well, if that's your end goal, then you're going to kind of reverse engineer like, okay, well, I've got to go and I've got to get this education. I've got to get this experience. I've got to apply for this job. You understand that there are steps that are going to lead you to becoming a teacher. And I think it's really healthy for parents to consider, okay, we know that parenting is a lifelong endeavor, but to consider, okay, when they leave our home, let's look at that kind of finish line, because that is the end of a season of parenting. So what do we want them to be like? What kind of young adults do we want to have raised and developed? Now, recognizing that it is not 100% within your control, but you definitely have influence in the person that they're going to become. And so looking at, okay, when our kids are ready to walk out of our home and go live on their own or go to college or whatever they choose to do, and then think, okay, these are the values that we want them to have, or this is who we want them to be developed into, and then reverse engineer that. Because if you're saying, I want our kids to know Jesus, to follow Jesus, to be generous, to be kind, that's not going to just happen by accident. And so then we can reverse engineer that and think, okay, there are steps that we can take to help guide them in that direction. So starting with the end in mind, with the end of that season in mind, can really help, I think, bring clarity to a vision statement for your family.
Mm-hmm. I think that's encouraging too for families in this stage, right? That primarily maybe you have kids like in elementary or younger. And right now, as a parent, your kid still views you as the authority, right? Yeah. Like they trust what you say. They believe your actions, right? There's not that sort of second doubt very often. Usually that hits later on. And so I think this is a great time that as we identify and figure out what these values are and start modeling them and teaching them, this is the time to do it right now, because your kids are trusting you. They're going to want to be like you to quite a bit of an extent. And so those are really important too, I think.
Yeah,
that's really good.
Were there any other tips you'd share with us?
Well, I think the other thing then would just be, as you are starting to formulate this vision statement, don't feel like it's something that you are doing alone. If you're a single parent, don't try to tackle this by yourself. Even as a couple, it can be really healthy to take a rough draft of your vision statement to trusted friends or trusted family members and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking for a vision statement, and allow them to offer some feedback, allow them to speak into it as you kind of formulate it and get it finalized. So I would allow other people that you trust and love and respect, allow them to speak into your vision statement.
Yeah, I was just talking with a friend who has an older child and is also like in college, out of college almost, and some younger boys as well. And so like just kind of picking her brain a little bit, like what would you have done differently in raising your kids or your oldest that you're now doing? And, she was able to just share some insight. And I just thought that like that's a good resource to talk to someone who had an older kid and many years later has younger ones. So they are learning again or doing things differently. Or also, just talking to even your parents. Like what, if you could have had a mission, or if you had a mission statement or a goal, what would that have been? Or if you go back and do that, what would it be?
Yeah, I think that's great. And so a next step for parents even could be, as you're working on this rough draft, head to the YouTube channel and in the comments, just share in there kind of what your rough draft is that you're working on. And let's be a community for each other, and let's share in there. So with that in mind, would you share with the parents kind of how you came to your vision statement, and so that it can kind of maybe help them a little bit on getting jump started with their vision statement?
Yeah, for sure. I would take it back to what you had said earlier about priorities. And we've had a lot of conversations about our priorities and what filters we're kind of using to make decisions on what we're going to be involved in or not involved in, or different opportunities that we're going to say yes to or no to. And so there were then some common threads, some common things that started to kind of rise to the surface. And so we just took those and thought, okay, let's start there. Those things are standing out to us. Let's start there and begin to craft our vision statement based on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love it. So would you share it with us?
Yeah. You've created so much like tension.
Here we go.
Suspense. All right. So as a family, we want to be a family that knows God, loves God, and walks in his ways. Mm-hmm. And really, my thought is with all 5 of our kids, when they are ready to leave the house, if they know God, love God, and walk in his ways, then we're going to feel like, man, we did what we were supposed to do. We hit the bullseye. We hit the target. In Psalm 127, children are referred to as arrows. And we're going to feel like we pulled that arrow back, aimed it, and we let it go and it hit the target. Whether they go on to college or doesn't matter how much money they're making, what job they take, where they end up living or any of that, if they know God, love God, and walk in his ways, we're going to feel like we accomplished what we were supposed to.
So Pastor Kayla, let me put you on the spot. As you are in this process of developing that vision statement for your family like the other parents, is there anything that you would share with where you're at on that journey?
Yeah. So hubby and I were sat down and we identified the values, right? These are the values of when my kid goes off to college or starts their job or is the next Disney princess, like whatever happens. But like, what do I want for them? Like, what are the values I want? Like we talked, like I want, excuse me, my baby.
It's okay.
Growing up, but
it's emotional. I know.
I want her to be confident, right? I want to work on that identity piece. I don't want her to be going into the young adult years not sure of who she is, right? I want her to be confident. I want her to be generous with her life. I want her to be faith-filled, like from our own lives and our family life so far. We have so many reasons to recount God's faithfulness to us and how we can have big faith and expect great things from God. And so those are a couple of the values that we were writing out, and we're working on the terminology of how to put it together into a statement. And, but that's where we started. We just started with writing down, like, what are the real things? Kaz was saying that he'd really like her to be great at Mario Kart, like unbeatable,
Yeah.
But that was more of like with the eating veggies. So we kind of took it back off the table.
I love that.
Yeah, but I think it's great. It reminds me of the proverb, train up a child in the way they should go, right? And I love, sometimes people cling to it as a promise. I trained my child up. How come they're not following it, right? It's not a promise, but it's a wise saying. That's what proverbs are. They're wise sayings. Train up your child in the way they should go. And they're gonna follow along with that. So let's trust our kids to God. Let's pray over this, our mission statement. Let's ask God for wisdom in it. Ask God for wisdom along the way, but be intentional with the time that we have.
Yeah, so parents, join in the comments on the YouTube channel at Parent Experience. Let us know where you're at in that journey. Maybe you have a draft. Maybe you have some values that you want to share. We'd love to see where you're at in that journey. But before we wrap up, got one last question for you guys. And so it's called the Parent Experience. And so we all have our own unique parent experiences, and we can learn from each other's parenting experiences. And so we want to learn a little bit from your guys' parenting experience. So what is something that you've learned in your parenting experience that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Oh, man. I got an idea. You want to go first?
Sure.
That way I don't steal yours.
Oh, yeah. Don't do that. So I would say in the last, couple years, we have learned a lot about love languages, the five love languages, and how our kids also have a love language and how we can love them better when we know that. And that's just been in the last couple years. I feel like that we've really honed in on that. And I wish I would have known sooner, but now we're able to really hone in on their love language. And I think it makes a big difference in their behavior when we're seeing outbursts of anger or trouble in school or whatever. We really have to come back to reflect okay, are we meeting their love language at home? Because it's not all on them. Yes, there is some responsibility there, but we play a big part as parents. And so being able to love them the way that they really feel loved is a game changer.
That's so good.
Yeah, for sure. And then for me, I think if you're familiar with the Enneagram at all, I'm an Enneagram 1, which tends to lean towards perfectionism. And so I look back now and realize what a hindrance that was in my ability to parent well. And over the last few years, I really feel like I have valued owning up when I have messed up and, going and apologizing to one of the kids if I didn't handle a situation well or whatever, and just modeling for them how to bounce back when they make a mistake. That, apologizing, asking for forgiveness, and then also extending grace back and forth, I think relieves some of the pressure when you do screw up. If it's been modeled well for you, how you bounce back, how you handle that, that's something that I think we have grown in. I have grown in for sure in the last few years, that I wish, man, if I could turn back the clock, I would know that when we first have our oldest, and would have just been doing that from the beginning. Because I think that's such a great life lesson for them to learn at a young age. What do you do when you've made a mistake? How do you own up to something? How do you handle failure?
Those are great nuggets, and that encourages parents. So thank you guys for sharing that. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. Thanks so much for coming and chatting and sharing your wisdom with us.
Yes, we appreciated it. So parents, remember, you're doing a great job. Keep raising amazing kids to know and love God, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See ya.